This Day in Sports History. And welcome back to This Day in Sports History. It's December 5th, and on this day, Richard Nixon presented a national championship trophy. The one and only World Bowl was played, and Joe Louis won a title fight. But he really wasn't happy about the decision when it was announced. Explanations to come on those stories, plus a non-sports fun fact at the end about the smallest state capital in the U.S. But when I come back, it will be a This Dish First. I'll tell you about something that has not happened yet. Back in a sec.
And that's the end of the first half. As the teams head to the locker room, the Spartans lead the Bulldogs by a score.
You guys stink.
Geez, Coach, we're only down a couple of points.
No, I mean you guys really smell. You need to hit the showers. And here, I got every one of you new bars of soap from the Sterling Soap Company. Each bar is artisan crafted using natural ingredients and essential oils. They also have shave soaps, colognes, beard balm, and a whole lot more. Now get in there.
But Coach, we have another half to play.
I don't care. I can't stand to be around you.
A few minutes later.
All right, bring it in tight. You guys are still playing terrible, but you're smelling great out there. Now listen, you're going to need to stock up for the rest of the season. We got a lot of tough games left. So go to sterlingsoap.com after the game. That's STIRLING soap.com. You got that?
Yes, Coach.
Great. Sterlingsoap.com on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Sterlingsoap.com.
You know, the nature of my podcast is to talk about stuff that's already happened, typically years in the rearview mirror. But I wanted to start today's show off with an event that has yet to happen. Sounds kind of odd, but stay with me here. Tonight, one of the cool traditions in college sports takes place once again. It's Silent Night at Taylor University. So Taylor is a Christian liberal arts school in the middle of nowhere, Indiana. And this evening, the Taylor Trojans will host Moody Bible College. The students will dress in costumes and then rush the court and find their seats in the bleachers 90 minutes before tip-off. Seems, pretty typical so far, right? But when the ball goes in the air at 6 p.m. tonight, the students will be ghostly quiet. Except for the sounds of squeaking sneakers, the dribbling of the basketball, the PA guy announcing who made the shot, and the referee's whistles, it's as if they're playing in an empty gym. Now, that is until Taylor scores its 10th point of the game. And when that happens, the silence is broken and it becomes pandemonium. The gym will erupt in chaos, the students will rush the court, and the game will come to a complete stop for several minutes. Once the game resumes, it's pretty much a normal, small college basketball atmosphere until the final 2 minutes of the game. With 2 to go, the students begin singing Silent Night in unison until the final horn blows. There are some other things that happen throughout the course of the night that make it unique as well, but that's the general gist of what's going on. This will be the 28th edition of Silent Night at Taylor, and the Trojans have quite the home court advantage with this tradition, winning 26 of the previous 27, including last year's 107-59 win over Moody. Go crazy, kids. All right, to things that have happened in the past now. On this day in 1974, it was the first and only World Bowl. Well, unless you count the 2000s reboot of the WFL, which I am most certainly not. The World Football League of the 1970s was the idea of Gary Davidson, who was also one of the original investors in the ABA and the World Hockey Association, or the WHA. Now, the concept was to take on the NFL head-to-head. And just like those 2 other rebel leagues he'd started, maybe get some teams swallowed up by the NFL. It was also supposed to have an international flavor, but the closest they ever got to that was a team based in Hawaii. The league rushed its start by a year, though. Originally, 1975 was supposed to be the start year, but labor issues in the NFL bumped it up to 74. But that doomed the league to ultimate failure. It barely made it to the World Bowl even. So on this day, it was the Birmingham Americans and the Florida Blazers. Birmingham built up a 22-0 lead thanks to plays like this. Here's Merle Harmon with the call for TBS that day.
Jenkins wide to the left and to the right side, Holman on 2nd and 9. Myra looks and throws, and Brown, the tight end, wide open touchdown. Bob Brown scoring for the Birmingham Americans.
So in the WFL, touchdowns counted a full 7 points. Kick conversions did not exist, but a scoring team could run or pass from the 5-yard line for what they called an action point. The Blazers scored 3 touchdowns, but could never convert one of their action points and came up a point shy. The Birmingham Americans hold the distinction as the first and only World Football League champions, winning the World Bowl 22-21. The league promised $10,000 to the winning team, but instead of bringing a check to midfield, league officials brought cash instead. The reason? Well, nobody in the league had faith that a check could actually be cashed. The WFL and its teams were hemorrhaging money. Birmingham was rewarded for their World Bowl win, with federal folks coming into the locker room and taking possession of any equipment that had value to pay a $237,000 tax debt. Players on both teams had been playing without being paid for the past several weeks. The WFL actually started a second season in 1975, but they did not make it to the postseason. The league shut down business 12 weeks into season number 2. On this day in 1969, it was another one of those collegiate games of the century. This particular version of the game of the century was number 1 Texas on the road at number 2 Arkansas. Darrell Royal versus Frank Broyles. It was a battle between 2 Southwest Conference rivals, and it was touted a bit prematurely as the national championship game of 1969. Both of these teams were 9-0 coming in, with winning streaks stretching back to the season before. There was a lot of interest all over the country in this one, and that was due in part to Michigan upsetting previously unbeaten and top-ranked Ohio State the week before. This rivalry game was typically played in October, though, but ABC's Roone Arledge persuaded the teams to move it to the final game of the year and promised that President Richard Nixon would be there in person. Nixon arrived just after kickoff. The television audience tuned in that day was absolutely huge. The game pulled a 52.1 Nielsen rating and a 74% share. Now, if those numbers don't mean anything to you, let's break that down. The 52.1 Nielsen rating means that of the homes participating in the Nielsen program, more than half were tuned in to watch this game. The 74 share means that close to 3/4 of the U.S. population at the time, which was about 203 million people, were aware of this game and tuned in at some point during the day. While there may be a game in the future with more total people tuned in, the 52.1 rating is still the highest for a football game, college or pro. And the folks who watched it saw a great one. Arkansas built a 14-0 lead, taking advantage of 2 Texas fumbles in the first and third quarters. The Longhorns finally got on the scoreboard on the first play of the fourth quarter. Quarterback James Street scrambled out of the pocket, broke a couple of tackles, and ran 43 yards for the touchdown. Texas head coach Darrell Royal had determined before the game started that he would go for 2 after his team's first touchdown to prevent a tie. Street ran the wishbone option and kept it himself for the conversion to make it a 14-8 game. Texas nearly cost themselves a shot at the win, though, when they turned the ball over for the 6th time late in the fourth quarter. Their defense forced a 3-and-out, and Texas had another opportunity. As I mentioned just a few moments ago, the Longhorns were a wishbone team. They ran the football very effectively, but Royal knew his team needed to do something special on what could be their final offensive drive. Facing a 4th down and 3, Royal called a timeout and then called a pass play to the surprise of Street, his quarterback, who asked, "Are you sure that's the play you want?" Royal replied, "Damn right, I'm sure." Here's Chris Schenkel with the call that day for ABC.
4th down play again for the Longhorns at their own 43.5. And going for broke to Randy Peschel, and Peschel What a toss. Randy Fishel.
Texas scored 2 plays later, kicked the extra point, and led 15-14. There was still time on the clock, though, and Arkansas pushed into Longhorn territory, but Tom Campbell, part of the twin brother defensive backfield for Texas, intercepted a pass to snuff the drive and preserve the 1-point win for the Longhorns. Now, there was some controversy that played out in the moments right after the game, and then for a few weeks following. President Nixon awarded a plaque to Texas after this one, declaring the Longhorns the national champion, despite the New Year's Day bowl games still to come. The awarding of this plaque to the winner of this game was arranged weeks in advance when Ohio State was still number 1 and undefeated. Penn State's Joe Paterno had been a little miffed by the theatrics as well. His Nittany Lion team was also undefeated. Instead of playing whoever the Southwest Conference champion turned out to be in the Cotton Bowl, though, Penn State opted to play in the Orange Bowl. They beat Missouri, leaving the unanswered question of who the best team in the country was in 1969. But on the bright side, it did become one of the first building blocks for the argument to have an official national title game that would not come along for another 30 years. And maybe it was more than just happenstance and coincidence that on this day in 2002, Roone Arledge passed away. I mentioned the influence that Roone had on moving the Texas-Arkansas game to the final week of the 1969 regular season and bringing Richard Nixon to the table and to the game. And he was indeed a very influential person in the world of sports. Without Roone Arledge, the sports we watch on television now and for the past 50 years would have looked a lot different. He started working for ABC in its fledgling sports division in 1960 and wanted to, as he put it, add show business to sports. Arledge followed the philosophy there are no bad ideas when innovating how sports was covered. He introduced cameras on shoulders on the sidelines to bring folks closer to the action, put cameras in the sky to provide aerial views, added microphones to bring the sounds of the game into your man cave. He was the mind behind ABC's Wide World of Sports that brought the world of sports to television every Saturday afternoon. He made sports a must-watch event, bringing sports programming out of its weekend time slot and into prime time every day of the week. His leadership in the coverage of the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City and 1972 in Munich was groundbreaking. And though it was not his idea, Monday Night Football grew into a phenomenon because of him in the 1970s, when he brought personalities such as Howard Cosell and Don Meredith into the booth, adding more and more cameras to the telecast, and opened the barn doors for sports to move into primetime. Arledge's style influenced everything that you see today, from personal stories about athletes' lives to slow-motion replays, split screens, and cameras isolated on a single player. Arledge wanted you emotionally invested in the game. He won a total of 37 Emmys throughout his time in television. Life magazine listed Arledge as one of the 100 most important Americans of the 20th century. Sports Illustrated ranked him third on a list of the 40 individuals who have most significantly altered or elevated the world of sports in the last 4 decades. When he died on this day in 2002, he was 71. And on this day in 1947, Joe Louis retained his title as heavyweight champion, but not without a little bit of controversy. The scene was Madison Square Garden. Joe Louis, the longest reigning heavyweight champion, taking on contender Jersey Joe Walcott. Louis won the heavyweight title in 1937 and for the next decade successfully defended that title against 23 challengers. Walcott was a journeyman fighter at this point, a former welterweight with 11 losses on his record, and a former sparring partner for Louis. Jersey Joe was a serious underdog coming into this one, a 10-1 long shot by most bookmakers. And yet, it was Walcott who came out fighting in the first. Louis looked flat to most ringside watchers and was looking for a quick knockout. He threw a punch and walked smack dab into a counter right from Walcott. That counter stunned Louis, and the champ went down. Walcott put him on the mat again in the 4th round. Jersey Joe, now sensing he had a big lead on the scorecards, used fancy footwork, some well-timed jabs, and a stinging right hand to keep winning rounds. His corner kept telling him to stay on his feet, and this fight would be in the bag. The final 3 rounds went in favor of Lewis by non-scoring observers, and as the final bell rang, most in the arena, including the champ himself, thought the decision was going to Walcott. In fact, Lewis attempted to climb out of the ring before the verdict was read because he was so disgusted with himself and figured there was no doubt he had lost it. But he was talked into staying and standing in the middle of the ring, and then was surprised when the 2-1 split decision was in his favor. The referee scored the fight in favor of Walcott, but the 2 ringside officials gave the fight to Lewis. The champ did not smile or celebrate or raise his arms in triumph. Instead, he gave Walcott a hug and apologized for the raw deal that Jersey Joe had just received. Joe Louis offered Walcott a rematch and a shot at redemption. The 2 fought in Yankee Stadium 6 months later. In that fight, Louis knocked Walcott out in the 11th to once again retain the title. The rematch would be the last time that Louis, aka the Brown Bomber, would defend his title. He retired from boxing on top in March 1949. He still holds the mark as the longest reigning champ in any boxing weight class. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. If you happen to travel to the capital of Vermont, Montpelier, you will not find a single McDonald's or Starbucks. It is the only U.S. state capital that does not have a McDonald's or a Starbucks. It also doesn't have a Burger King or a Wendy's or a Walmart or anything like it. Instead, the town focuses on and emphasizes small local companies, restaurants, and coffee shops. That's all I've got for you today. I'll have more tomorrow on This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.